Hare Krishna, my name is Radhika Devidasi. This is the second video that I'm doing in a series that I'm dedicating to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In the first video, I spoke a little bit about Srila Prabhupada. He is referred to in ancient Vedic scriptures as the Jagat Guru, or the spiritual master for the entire world. This is not a light statement. Srila Prabhupada came to give us the science of God realization so that we knew how to awaken our true love for God or for Krishna. To this end, as I mentioned also in the first video, he established ISKCON, or the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He wanted this to be an organization in which those who joined and those who were being born into the organization could be raised in a very joyful spiritual environment, could come together to serve, to practice the beautiful and joyful practices of realizing God, to chant, dance, and feast, as he said. Unfortunately, over time, the pure teachings that Srila Prabhupada gave and the spiritual essence have been separated from the organization. I mentioned that I grew up in the organization and that I came to realize and remember later on that I had gone through some very deep and very difficult child abuse and trauma within the organization. I've had peers also who have had many negative experiences within what they felt was a cult and have gone on into their healing process, and some have made videos in which they have talked about their healing process, how they have come out the other end, and how they are now leading so-called normal lives. And whereas I'm happy to see that they have healed and are healing, I also see that they have thrown out the essence of their spiritual life and their spiritual teachings that will make them eternally happy. As I went into my healing process, I had to decide how I was going to move forward and what I was going to do. Was I also going to, proverbially speaking, throw the baby out with the bathwater, or was I going to separate the teachings that Srila Prabhupada gave, the spiritual essence and the potency that he gave, from all the mixed messages and the abuse of the trauma that I went through? I certainly could have left. I could have become a CEO. I could have become an entrepreneur. I have the training. I have the qualifications. But I made the decision to take shelter of the essence what Srila Prabhupada gave, and to really go very deep into my process of sifting what was truly what Srila Prabhupada gave and what was mixed up with all of the abuse, all the messages, so on and so forth. I decided that I was not ever going to throw away what Srila Prabhupada gave me. I was never going to give up the process. And I was in fact going to take shelter of what he gave and what the process that he gave as my ultimate healing. And this is what I've really thrown myself into. I came to understand that when a child grows up in an abusive environment, according to child psychology and child development, they grow up feeling with a lack of self-worth, a lack of self-confidence, not feeling safe, not feeling secure. And this is something that I've had to work at very hard to repattern and to bring into my adult self. It's been a very difficult process. I have seen how the abuse has caused so many physical ailments and symptoms, so many different things that I've had to go through, emotionally speaking as well. But as I come out the other side, I understand and have accepted that the abuse I had to go through was also part of a purification for me, in which I decided to release the blame and the shame and also the guilt around so much of how it affected me, because I saw that it affected my decision making. It affected the relationships the people that I allowed to be close to me. It affected how much abuse I took later on in life, emotionally, verbally, so many other ways. And it also affected decisions I would make in my child rearing that were not true to who I really am as a mother. So this is something that I've had to really set myself to very strongly heal from. And it's working. The healing process is working. I'm fortunate enough to be a part of and with others who are also deeply in the healing process, who have taken full accountability for their healing, and who are taking very deep shelter of the process of Krishna consciousness, taking shelter of the many books that Srila Prabhupada gave us on the science of God realization, of how we can understand that we're not this body, that we're part and parcel of the Lord, that we have a specific function in relationship to God, in relationship to Krishna, and that He misses us, and that He wants to reestablish that relationship with us, and that in fact we can do that just by following this process, by hearing from Srila Prabhupada's books, by chanting the Mahamantra that he gave us that's coming straight from the spiritual world. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. By speaking about the Lord and His glories. And Srila Prabhupada gives us actually all of the qualifications, all of the characteristics of God, so many stories about Him, who He really is, who He associates with, and His activities. And it's an amazing, amazing, joyful process. It's been difficult to see how the abuse has affected me and the people I love, and also to understand that this is not what Srila Prabhupada wanted. He, in fact, gave so much to help establish schools where we can be raised in a protected and loved environment. But due to an evil agenda, I've come to see, there were those who came in and did just the opposite. And I've also had to come to understand who is really my friend, who is really a follower of Srila Prabhupada, who I gave my authority away, my power away to so-called authorities that were not at all, deserving of it. And it's been a very painful and very, very, very real sifting process. But I understand from the results and from my healing and from a deeper sense of happiness and peace that this is what was intended for me, and this is what God has intended for me, and that I am pleasing Him by doing this, by going through the healing process, by taking shelter of Srila Prabhupada, by taking so seriously this human form of life and applying it to God consciousness, and by understanding how important the children, the third generation is what we refer to, who are coming and taking to the process of Krishna consciousness. So I'll explain a little bit. This first, second, third generation term. The first generation are those who had the great opportunity to physically associate with Srila Prabhupada when he was in his physical form and take direct instruction from him. So my parents, and then I'm the second generation and my peers, and then our children are the third, and there's some fourth generation coming in. Srila Prabhupada said purity is the force, and he said that the third generation would have the opportunity to be pure devotees and to become the spiritual leaders that this world so desperately needs. He had someone ask him, well, why not the second generation? Because we were also born into this organization and practicing the practices, being vegetarian from a very early on life, as well as many other processes that Srila Prabhupada gave. And he looked at this person who asked him, who was part of the first generation, and said, because they have to associate with you. So by this, it's been explained to me that he understood that the first generation that he was taking under his wing, his shelter to give this process to, they were coming from most were coming from very rough, variegated backgrounds, and that their stuff, so to speak, would be something that we would have to sift through and, in a lot of ways heal from also, in order to become more pure and to pass on the purity to the third generation. Srila Prabhupada did so much, and I will talk about more of that, his status, his teachings, and his goals. And it will be astonishing to see what he accomplished in his life. And even more astonishing is that he said that only 50% of his work was done. He said the other 50% was to establish sustainable farm communities. He instructed that this was the way to nourish our children, to nurture them, to bring them up in loving and secure environments, so that they could develop their innate Krishna consciousness. We can see that a lot of people are trying to do that right now, in the sense that they're trying to bring together sustainable communities, but that it's not working, and that some of the symptoms are that is that you see people within these communities who end up swapping spouses or taking to drugs. And the reason is, Srila Prabhupada said, is because God is not in the center, that all success comes from God being in the center, and without this there is no or very limited success. And he is the only one who gave us the perfect instruction for developing these communities in which we can practically, very practically, put God in the center and reap the results of that. And I'm fortunate enough to understand more and more what that is, and to be following those instructions, to be moving forward, and to be feeling the effects of that in a beautiful way, and to be doing that with peers and with very sincere devotees who are also doing that. And it's such a joyful process. And I want to share it. I want to speak the importance of what Srila Prabhupada has given me, and the instructions, and the depth of this process of awakening our dormant love for God, for Krishna within our heart, how real it is, how wonderful it is, and how, as Krishna says, he protects us, he's our ever well-wisher, and he will deliver us from suffering, of which birth, death, disease, and old age are the main components of our suffering, and that these don't end until we take to this pure process of Krishna consciousness, until we understand we're not the body, until we revive our dormant love for Krishna and take up the function that is ours to serve the Lord in this life, and then at the end of this life go back home to the spiritual kingdom where we actually belong. So I invite you to please be interested in what Srila Prabhupada has given, to please look at his books, to go to www.purelyprabhupada.com, PurelyPrabhupada.com. You can read about the books that Srila Prabhupada has given. You can get more information about who he is. You can also ask questions. And I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Thank you for watching. Hare Krishna.